All right, well, we're going to get going. Happy Wednesday afternoon. I checked. It is Wednesday afternoon. There have been some of us that are wondering, what day is it? What month is it? Someone said, is it March 47th? No, it's actually April 52nd right now. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Kari Anderson. I own a consulting practice called Insight Consulting. It's spelled that way on purpose, in case you're wondering. It's snowing in Tetonia, Idaho right now, and so I'm really bummed because we can't ski, but that's okay. I'm here with you instead. When Amy Little and Evan Bask and I were talking about topics that were top of mind for some of our nonprofit constituents in Idaho, one of the pieces and parts that has come up is, hey, we're at home, and we weren't planning on being at home. We had 17 hot seconds to get out of our office and all of a sudden work remotely. And because we can't do some of the things that we are used to doing in the office, whether you're an executive director or whether you are a program director, maybe you're in charge of fundraising, we are wondering what the heck to do with our extra time. I haven't had any. For those of you who've been baking wonderful things and posting pictures on social media, I haven't yet been able to join that party. I've been busy with a little bit of work. So I'm hoping that that might be a thing for me in the next couple days. However, this call today is about what you can do with extra time that will really help you and put you in a position of strength and frankly, put you in a position of control when we get back to the office, right? Whenever that is. So I'm appreciative of you joining me. For those of you that are new, here's how this works. I do not have you all on my screen on purpose. I'd be admiring hairstyles or what you're wearing. I also don't have the ability for you to talk to me. I have you all muted, but I do have the ability for you to ask me questions in the Q&A, and all of you will have the opportunity to raise your hand with certain questions that I'll be asking you, because it gives me an idea as to how much time we should be spending on a topic. So that's the deal, and we're going to roll. So here is our agenda for the day. I've not been through a pandemic before, just wanted to let you know. I'm not aged enough to have been through Spanish flu, but I have worked as an executive director during 9/11. I have worked as an executive director during the recession. And one of the things that has struck me is that we run so quickly in this sector, especially if you're a generalist and if you don't have a lot of staff, and times to pause are few and far between. We have a forced time to pause right now for many of us. And I always have a running to-do list, at least I did when I was in the sector, of things that I would like more time to be able to dig into. And the big topics that I continue to hear from and people are telling me is, hey, we need to figure out our cash position. We need to figure out how we diversify revenue streams. We need to figure out how to put our programs online. We need to finally get around to addressing burnout. Add to this list for your nonprofit. So today we're really going to talk about how we take the time to think about bigger picture items that impact you. My guess is some of these were impacting you prior to us needing to close business temporarily. And then there are some additional administrative projects, the unsexy pieces, that are just so important to be able to give you bench strength. And it doesn't matter whether you're in Bonner County or whether you're in Nez Perce County or whether you're in Ada County or what town you're in, right? What metropolitan size you have. There's always administrative pieces that just aren't so fun, that are so important to the work you do. So those are the two big pieces we'll be talking through today. So some of you, again, have been with me, right? You've heard this, but I'm gonna preach it again. You can't do anything right now until you're taking care of yourself and your people, right? If you've got people, you're taking care of your donors, and that doesn't mean asking in that same phone call, right? And if we do those things, we can take care of the organization. So if we haven't taken care of ourselves, folks, that's your first list, right? If we haven't reached out to our donors yet, EDs, this would be a fabulous time for you to check in with your development staff. First of all, to see how you can help with this. And second, to make sure that these calls are getting made. These calls are not, oh, George and Henrietta, will you please give us money? It's, George and Henrietta, how are you doing? Right? How is your health? How have you been impacted by this? What care and support can we offer during this time? And then we can get to the spirit and morale of our organization and talk about net revenues. So there's that. So here's what I'm seeing, right? I had mentioned a little bit of this, and let me go ahead and just dig into this a little deeper. So these are our big pieces. We're pinched right now with money across the board, right? I've participated in 7 state association surveys, just in terms of what are we looking at in terms of problems, and we've got some cash issues for sure. We have some organizations that have cash, but it is totally locked up in terms of restricted program funding, right? We have significant issues right now because of our offices being closed on our ability to be able to deliver on our programs. And most times our programs are directly impacted to how we can actually deliver on mission, right? In case we weren't worried about burnout before, oh, we're focusing on it now, right? And the added layer is isolation that goes along with this. And the other big thing that I'm hearing is, so we haven't been telling our story well, or we've only been telling it in one vehicle, right? Our executive director, sorry, execs, I'm going to bust on you because, again, guilty is charged here. We've not done a great job of taking advantage of speaking opportunities, presentation opportunities, to be able to tell our story. And we know that great fundraising stems from great organizational storytelling. So here are some of the pieces that I would like you to consider. If we've got extra time on our hands, these might be a topic or topics that you and your team decide to delve into when you are working together with how do we spend these extra chunks of time, right? So this is a little frightening stat. This kind of goes along with our lack of funds. Currently, only 20% of nonprofit funding in the US is unrestricted. I'd like you to think really quickly, how much of your funding is unrestricted? Okay. So this is the time for you to shove this in the Q&A. Do you know off the top of your head approximately how much of your annual fundraising or earned income or program revenues, how much of it's unrestricted? How much of it is fungible, meaning you can move it around to take care of whatever you need to handle, whether it's in times of health or whether it's in times of crisis. Pull out your calculators if you need to. I'd love to have a number, right? So here's the deal. If you're grant funded, most nonprofits have grants that dictate that those funds are put directly towards a program or a project. That's just the way grant makers work. So that limits your overhead, and it contributes to what we would call the scarcity mentality or the starvation cycle of a nonprofit. And we are working so hard in this sector. We've probably been working for the last 10 years to really move our major grant making funders as well as our individual donors who have pet projects away from that mentality. And while we certainly have made some headway, boy, things like this certainly come to bite us, right? So we have to start to address this. Oh, Stephanie, you're my hero. So Stephanie says, most of ours is not restricted aside from a few small grants that are for supplies. I'm going to send you a cape, a virtual cape, right? Superhero cape. Thank you, Stephanie. We want that, right? We wish that for everyone. That's great. Maybe we can talk offline about how you've done that because you'd be a great example for your peers, right? So here's the other issue that goes along with our revenue pieces. Maybe this isn't the case for you, but when we did a nationwide survey about a year and a half ago, 81% of nonprofit leaders say that access to capital, right, in terms of cash, is your biggest challenge. So we haven't thought strategically, and I would say as a sector, there are certain, and that's a generalization, certainly, but as a sector, we still function in, oh, we're going to apply for grants, or we're going to look at federal funding, or we're going to have a special event, or yeah, maybe we'll get off the stick and move some of our annual donors to becoming major gifts. There are quite a few additional modalities for you to have funds. And I'm not talking about bake sales, right? Let's just put that out there. It could be earned income. It could be third-party revenues. It could be significant corporate partnerships. Note that I did not say corporate sponsorships. It's a difference, right? The big opportunity, I think, for your group right now is to be looking at your current fundraising revenues or other revenues that help to build your annual budget, to be able to say, so what's our current mix and what do we like about that and what do we not? And moving forward, what do we want the mix to look like? Should it be, or could it be, both philanthropic capital and earned income? Every single one of you, your business model is different. What matters is that you all know what business model is, instead of doing, oh, well, we've always done this, and so we're going to continue to always do this, because that's probably not how things are going to work for us. Certainly short term and quite potentially long term. So actually talking through how we are going to raise our funds, program, earned income, philanthropic gifts, right? That's a biggie. And making sure that as we build that model, that the majority of those funds are unrestricted, right? So how do we go about doing this? Oh, people, we have to talk to our donors, right? So first things first, if we, if you, the royal we, right? I'm in this with you. If we are funded significantly by grant makers, then we ought be on the phone with them. First of all, checking in to see how they're doing. Again, this probably has impacted them as well. Secondly, to make sure they know what your plan is right now, right? Again, they've invested in you as a donor. There's probably a program report that's due. If you're unable to deliver on program, they should know that. And this starts the larger conversation with them as to what do we need to do to build a different working relationship? What do we need to do to get to a space of trust where that you give us the same, ideally, or more preferred money, and you trust us to spend it in the manner that we should to deliver our mission with no strings attached to it? That's your charge, right? It would be the same charge with any individual donor or corporate partner that has put restrictions on how you choose to fund or how you choose to spend their money, right? And the second piece in terms of solution is just a commitment to a diversified revenue stream, so that should you have pieces and parts that are restricted, that they do not comprise the bulk of your budget. Okay, so this is potentially one area that you could leverage some time in, right? Is to really working through, so what does your next funding model look like? So the next big piece is this, right? Some of us are really data driven, right? We're data geeks, love that, right? And some of you are really sophisticated as to how you have been collecting your data. However, we don't use it well, right? So we have to be thinking about, again, since we've got this extra time at home between cats and pets and other humans in our households, and hopefully some self-care, is this. How does the data that you have been collecting prove that your nonprofit is making a difference? Great time to ask the question, right? And then how does that data show where you need to improve? Because it's not all wine and roses with the data that we've been collecting, right? That might show impacts or how you've moved closer to delivering on mission, but it doesn't necessarily show, or we haven't looked at, our weak spots. So both of those are important, right? If you know where the weak spot or area to improve is, then you can actually build a solution for it. The big deal here is that organizations that hunt for stats, like how can you prove you're delivering on mission and where you need to improve, they naturally solve a third issue. And that is the issue that proving to donors that the funds they have invested with you have been making a difference, that you were a good investment. So this potentially could be something that you dig into in terms of leveraging this extra time that you have. Now the question is going to be, who all do you need to involve in this in the conversation, right? So here are some steps for you to be able to start working through this. First question, when was the last time you did a program assessment? When was the last time that you did a data analysis? These are often things that if we have become more sophisticated in our work, they're put into the program officer or program developer or program coordinator's job description, and ideally have moved to part of your performance objectives for the year. But sometimes they get pushed aside, right? Because there's always some other fire to be working on. Well, no time like now, right? And part of this whole little conundrum that we're in right now is, since we can't deliver on programs, it naturally leads to, besides analyzing trends and demonstrating that your programs are having an impact on your mission or cause. So this is the time to be thinking about what if. And here's what if could look like. What if we can't open until the end of the school year? What if we can't start to deliver on programs until the end of April? What if by the time we are finally allowed to not shelter in place, we've missed our programming window for the year? What if we are not allowed to open during tourist season? Right? So some clients that I work with have already started to work on, how can we deliver our programs virtually? And what would that look like? And rather than, taking, all programs at once and completely overwhelming, they've been very clear about which programs are truly making an impact on our mission or cause and are absolutely critical for the work that we do. This may be the time that you decide, hey, we've taken on too many programs. We've taken on too many pet projects, and some decisions will need to be made about, do we shed any of these? Do we need to augment them in order for them to be of value? Do we need to shelve them until our situation or roadmap is clear? Those are all great conversations to have, and you have the time to be able to do it, right? So, anyone? Love to see hands. If I don't see hands, I might think you're lying to me. Anyone having an issue with burnout in their office before we all went on this little forced sabbatical? Okay, well, I'm so pleased to know that, there we go. Someone's being honest. Again, I'll send a cape in the mail. Oh, 2 people are being honest. Excellent, right? Folks, I felt it. Right? I mean, I've worked for large national organizations, and I worked for small organizations, and this is a big thing, and it's a big thing for leaders to be able to address and be able to own and be able to help work through, right? Where we see this happening most, and I'll tell you, this is a lonely spot to be in. Sorry, I'm sure cat hair on my nose, excuse me. And again, unabashed fan of the work that you do. And I will always consider myself a lapsed executive director, since that was my title, right, for so long. I happen to think that working in this sector is the best possible place you can be in the world. Unabashed fan of the work we do. I also happen to think the role of an executive director is the best role that I have ever had, although I love my consultant jam, right? I love being an ED. I will also tell you that that was one of the loneliest jobs I ever had, because the whole admitting to people that you're tired, or the admitting to people that you're nervous, or the admitting to people that you don't feel like this is your skill set. Some of our nonprofits haven't set the stage for us to have authentic conversations about how to work through this. And it's certainly difficult to go to your board, especially if you're having a somewhat cantankerous relationship with your board chair, to admit that you need some help, right? So it puts us in this really tricky spot. Burnout is elevated even more for founders and executive directors, because we tend to carry, right or wrong, the weight of the organization on our shoulders, right? It's a tough spot for us to be in. So a solution is to begin to admit that leading collaboratively is a good idea, right? And it sounds somewhat oxymoronic, but really the crux of this is, we have to get over our delegation issues. And man, I had an issue with that when I was an executive director. I hoarded projects, and that ended up minimizing staff, right? It certainly marginalized some of my staff. So what does this look like? Again, we have to take care of ourselves, and that means modeling for your team. So again, I'll bust on myself. I know that I function best in the morning as a human. I'm a morning person, always have been. I do my best work in the morning. I also know that's when I should work out, because in the work we do, oftentimes there's a late afternoon meeting that pops up, or there is a donor event we should be at, or there is a Rotary dinner, or there is an event honoring a colleague right after work, and we should be there. And so my knee jerk, however, is, because I love my job and I like to work, because I know I do meaningful work, I forego my workout in the morning and I jump right onto what I should be doing, especially in times of crisis. Well, that doesn't help me at all. I can assure you, if my husband walked in the room right now, he said, "Oh, it doesn't help us either," right? So magnify that when you have staff or kids, or other volunteers that your role is to lead. So I have made a commitment to myself during my time of being at home, that I need to develop a different habit with regard to some of my self-care, because then I can be a good example and model for my clients, right? That's a challenge for you as well. So execs, here's another solution with regard to the burnout. I don't know whether this has happened to any of you. I'll give the example. You can wave your hand. So I remember when I was hired at a nonprofit that shall remain nameless, and I had a job description that was presented to me, certainly during interview, but then on like my first week of work as part of that orienting. And I'm not lying, 17 pages long. I'm not lying, 17 pages. I actually still have the PDF of it because it was just so absolutely ludicrous. I mean, it was like the dumping ground of everything and, can of soup. And when you really started to go through it, some of these things hadn't been done for years by the organization, but we did this pile on. Anyone have a job description where when you look at it, you say, this might have been the ED's job like 5 years ago, but we have some staff now and staff have taken this, or that's actually not even a part of our mission. So if I don't see any hands, you're either lying to me or you really haven't looked at your job description since you were hired, or thank you, Gabby. Or you're better than I am at this and you actually have updated it every year. And if that's the case, I will send you like a virtual glass of wine right now, right? So here's an opportunity. This is the chance for you to actually look at your job description to say, is everything here actually legit? Is this a part of my job? And this isn't about you being better than your staff, right? It's about being real about what you were hired to do, because your staff need to be empowered to do their job. And sometimes staff means the unpaid volunteers that are there performing staff roles, right? The third piece of this solution, and I believe so vehemently in this that I actually led a session on this at the Montana Nonprofit Association conference last year. And part of this was therapy for me, I'll just tell you, how to delegate, right? And really looking at delegation as a form of leadership, recognizing what you were hired to do and what we were lucky enough to hire staff to do. And that we have to get out of our own way and allow staff to step into bigger and bigger roles as a form of job development, right? And personal development for them. So an opportunity for you really, again, if you choose to use this as how you're leveraging your time, how better can you empower your staff to be leading with you as a part of a collaborative? Certainly there's more buy-in to the organization. And I think most importantly right now, it's going to lessen burnout for you. So that might be a thing for you to consider. Now, here's, I'm not going to say the last, right? But the last big piece that I've been hearing a lot of chirping on in terms of things we don't have time for, but ought be addressing. 53% of us spend less than 2 hours preparing for public speaking. And there's actually so much more than this, right? This is like the little tiny piece of the iceberg. So think back to what I would call differently normal for us. So let's think back to January, February 2020. How many of you had an opportunity to speak in public about your organization at least once during those 2 months? Please raise your hand. Yay, Jean. Yay, Jean. Rah, rah, Jean. Excellent. Okay, now here's the other question. How many of you had an opportunity and you squandered it? that there was somewhere you could have spoken. Rotary, Kiwanis, donor event, at the gala, making the ask for your special appeal, being in front of a group of volunteers, a donor gathering, anything like that that was on your calendar that perchance you didn't take advantage of? Or are you all better than I am? I think you all might be better than I am. Oh, there we go. Okay. Honesty is the best policy. Thank you, Gabby, right? Or maybe those 2 months aren't the best indicator, right? This could be looking back towards fourth quarter. This is the bigger issue with regard to this, right? So what we know from stats is, I'm going to read these to you because they were a little horrifying to me. So not all of us, strangely enough, are great public speakers. I love speaking with and interacting with people. It hasn't happened in a while. It's not happening right now. If I had better tech, I would show you my knees. They're not knocking, right? But for a long period of time, I would feel really comfortable on stage, whether it was a group of 1,000 people or like a group of 10, and my right knee would do this little tick, tick, tick. So evidently I wasn't as comfortable as I thought I was. But stats say that only about 10% of us really feel comfortable in front of others speaking, and it's not an if or, it's an and, consider themselves to be well-trained storytellers, right? So there might be more of us that can get up in front of a crowd and blather on, if you will, but only 10% of us actually feel like we have been well-trained storytellers. And we know that there is a significant payoff in organizational storytelling, right? So here's the example I want to give you, and then you guys might be, once you get the deck, right, you'll do some Googling. So there's a woman by the name of Nadine Burke Harris, and she is the founder and CEO for a group called the Center for Youth Wellness. And their work basically is to diagnose and support kids who have suffered a traumatic event, including abuse and neglect. So she was offered the opportunity in 2014 to give a TED Talk. And her goal really was to popularize the problem about what toxic stress does to future developmental, physical, mental, spiritual needs in kids, right? So big deal all the way around. She practiced for 6 months. 6 months for the TED Talk. Now, for those of you that have gone through TEDx, and we have it in Spokane, and I've seen the process, it's not just that it's a good idea to practice for 6 months. They actually have an application system, and they have mandatory practices because they want to make sure that you're set up for success. Am I telling you that for every speech that you give, right, it's 6 months of practice? No. It's, do we actually even have a story to tell? And have we challenged ourselves to make sure we're telling it as often as we can to as many mediums as we can? And executive director, this is your job, right? So we have many, if you're the ED, certainly if we're lucky enough to have a communications director, they're involved with this, right? They're another voice. Certainly, if you are in the business of fundraising for the organization, we are chief storytellers for the organization as well. And stories now can be shared on so many different mediums, right? Social media, newsletter, annual report, in person, right? Donor events, Kiwanis, Rotary, your galas. But we haven't taken the time to actually write the stories, right? And so in my world, there ought to be 5 stories that you tell, right? I know there's more, but there's 5 baseline stories that every organization could tell. And again, if you've got nothing but time on your hands right now, this is the time to be able to get these done. Not only should you have these stories as staff, I always recommend that board members have these stories, because again, if we are thinking about what the board's role is in making sure that you are fiscally healthy, it involves fundraising, and great board fundraising starts with the ability to network, to connect, and to tell the story, right? So here are the 5 stories. Everyone should know the origin story for your nonprofit. And oh, folks, the origin story doesn't differ, right? It's the same story. It's not like a, well, here's my version and here's your version. And no, this is actually how our nonprofit was formed. There's one origin story. And part of this exercise helps if you don't have this information, if it's in someone's head in terms of institutional knowledge, now's the time to be able to get it out of someone's head, right? It's also good risk management for your organization. The second story is your personal story. Why are you involved with this organization? And everyone has a different story. And so many of these will make you weep, right? They're just really, really impactful. And it's important for us to have those down. The third story is how your nonprofit helps to overcome adversity. What's your skin in the game in helping those you serve overcome adversity? The fourth is how your organization solves a problem. And these last two folks get hung up on because we haven't paused to think about this, right? So how do you solve a problem? And the fifth, and this is super fun, a hero story. When you've been at your best, right? When a volunteer's been at their best, when a donor's been at their best, when one of your program participants is at their best, what happens? And how does that become a part of your mission? So here's your opportunity, right? Again, if you're going to pick one of these, do we need to have better organizational storytelling? And then I throw the gauntlet down to say, and when are you going to use it? And ideally, executive director, when are you going to be out with people? I know you can't plan that now, right? But boy, when our little shelter in place is done and the nation is healthier, my challenge to you is, how often are you going to be out telling your organization's story, right? So there's additional projects that you can work on. If the ones that I have mentioned aren't big ticket items for you, here are some additional thoughts for you to consider in terms of big picture items in order to strengthen your organization. So if you are involved in advocacy work, here's some ideas for you, right? Do you actually have a plan? I know many conservation organizations do. Many organizations that are involved in health and human services do. Some of us don't have a need to advocate. Some of us don't have the need to lobby, so we don't have to work on this. But if you do, then you would have position statements that might need to be freshened. And it probably is high time for us to pick up the phone. Again, our elected officials are somewhat stuck as well. So would this not be a great time to be connecting with them, first as humans, and second, to be able to catch up and talk with them about your positions and where they can be of help to you on the Hill, right? Whether it's on the Hill in DC or whether it's at your state capital. With regard to volunteers, all of us have them. Most of us don't use them well. Why? Again, we've been a little reactive and we haven't had time to put together plans so that they can actually come in and add value. I know for me, there's nothing worse than having time that I want to volunteer to an organization and I come in and they have nothing for me to do, or there's no one who's willing to train me. There's no documents or binders or manuals that I can follow along with because I'm a good self-starter. And then I'm never thanked if there's actually something for me to do. So great time to be thinking about how could we use volunteers differently. I'm not sure how it's working in your particular markets, but I'm getting emails all the time from the Community Foundation in Jackson talking about volunteer opportunities because we still have places that are essential and people need help. I know there are a ton of volunteer opportunities available in the Boise market and in Spokane right now, right? So this is a time to be able to look at this to say, do we need some help, right? And if we've gotten better with our volunteers, but maybe not so great as to how we recognize them, now might be the time to actually formalize what that looks like for you. And this looks different for every organization, and it does not need to cost anything, right? A phone call, a thank you note, a mention from the podium, those are all free and meaningful. So nowhere in here am I saying you need to spend money on this. So if you've got this handled, maybe we take a peek at board development in terms of leveraging time. I am not going to tell you how many clients, board members have canceled board meetings in March and April this year when, oh, folks, we need that board together more than ever right now, right? To plan, to support the executive director, to pivot, right? To prioritize. And yeah, if you're not up on tech right now, that means a conference call. If you need to learn tech, this is the time to do it, right? There's still board work to be done, even in times of chaos, especially in times of chaos. And my guess is there might be some things on this list that we could be leaning into in terms of leveraging time. When was the last time the bylaws were reviewed or updated? Has the board done a self-evaluation? No time like the present. Do we actually have a formalized board orientation? And heads up, folks, a board orientation is not handing someone your board manual or giving them the link to the Google Drive and saying, hey, everything you need is there. No, it's actually an agenda and players in a part of the board orientation. You can still orient people. You can do it virtually, right? You don't have to wait until we can actually meet again. If your board manual is dusty, right? Stayed, maybe out of date. It's a time for us to be able to make sure all of the paperwork that a board member needs in terms of being responsible for risk management, for legal and financial risk management practices are there. If we have not created an annual calendar of board meetings, this would be a time to do it. If we have not set our board committee meetings, great time to be working with your board committee chairs. If you don't have a board retreat date on the calendar for 2020, your people have nothing but time too, right? Send a doodle poll right now. And if we don't have a current strategic plan in place, or if we need to pivot on our current strategic plan, we can also get a date on the calendar for that as well. And for those of you, it's so good that I can't see your eyes, because I'm going to guess that a couple of you are rolling eyes going, there's no way we're going to have a board retreat via Zoom, or there's no way we're going to do strategic planning via Zoom. Yes, you are. Right? I mean, yes, you are. And I'll give you an example of how this is working right now. So I'm not suggesting that a board needs to be on an 8-hour Zoom call. That makes me want to vomit a little bit too. That's just not going to work. But what I have done with a client, and it worked out fabulously, is we chunked their 8-hour board retreat into 4 2-hour sections, right? And we made the agenda, we tweaked it, right, so that it could fit that. You still have the ability to break out into groups via Zoom, got Zoom rooms and chat rooms, and people can still work in small groups that way, and then they come all back together and can talk, right? So is it just like in person? No. Does it work? Certainly, right? Does it take a little while to work the kinks out? Oh yeah, right? But this is a time for you to be able to be digging into that and figuring out how it works. Last couple pieces, again, for you to consider, it's like a smorgasbord. You get to pick, right? In case you're wondering, what should I do? We got lots. So again, if you are a one-man shop, one-woman shop, or in case you are lucky enough to have an ops director or an HR staff person, here might be some opportunities for them to dig into. Do we actually have all of our organizational policies and procedures, and have they been updated recently, right? Some of that could look like this. Do we actually have a telecommuting policy? We want to write one. Do we have an attendance policy? Again, we can't micromanage our staff from afar. So having policies as to, so what does attendance mean? Do we have a social media policy? Might want to have one now, right? Since we're all at home on social media, what we can and can't do, what we should and shouldn't be posting on behalf of the organization. Do we have an updated confidentiality policy? Do we have a data protection policy or procedures? When was the last time we updated the employee code of conduct? And part of that really has to do with when you have staff working at home that still are interacting with the public, what does that look like in terms of dress code? Right? So we've all seen the memes, right? And the videos wandering around of, business on top and, party down below in terms of jammy bottoms or slippers, right? Or whatever that looks like. But you're still representing your business, right? When we are interacting like this. And so what's our policy? right? What are our minimum standards that we have? Do we have a current anti-discrimination and equal opportunity policy? We should. If we don't, it's an opportunity to go ahead and make sure that that's in writing. If we've got all of those things, then it's a chance for you to tackle employee review templates, making sure that you actually have current performance objectives for all your employees, because you shouldn't be evaluated on your job description. You should be, especially if it's 17 pages long, right? You should be evaluated on performance objectives that are pulled from core responsibilities on your job description and have metrics attached so that you can be reviewed objectively. Where are all your files? And a lot of you might be saying, they're in my office, which I can't access, Kari, duh. Well, this might be the time for us to be looking into how do we finally digitize all of our documents and make sure that they're protected. Do we have risk management documents? And those usually look like, a document that lists how to access the server, who our attorney is, where we bank, who has access, what happens, right? It used to be called bus proofing, but now it looks like emergency succession planning. Do we actually have those documents in place? And if not, well, this is the time for us to be able to tackle that. Last but not least, but boy, super important as we work from home, right, is all of our tech. And that can look like, what platforms are we currently using at the office that we can or can't use from home? Are there additional platforms that we may want to consider in order to make us more efficient? Do we need something like Slack or Basecamp with different, we call them channels, right, for different subjects so that people don't get lost in email when we're working on projects? How do we ensure that we have high-speed internet for everyone who's working from home? That's a key piece for all of us. And it might involve some money being spent by the organization. And if you can't invest in that because we don't have resources, or the employee lives in a space like me that does not have high-speed internet, then what concessions are we going to make, and how do we spell that out to the employee so that we have parity, right? This is the chance to be able to look at what we need for updated technology. I think many of you know about TechSoup, right? TechSoup is a wonderful organization that offers discounts to nonprofits on software and sometimes hardware. Again, I'm not a huge fan of writing grants, and certainly writing grants for things that are restricted. I am a huge fan of writing grants for organizational capacity building and for making sure that you have the technology, tools, supplies, and infrastructure to do your job, right? And the fourth piece that probably needs some work is the donor database. Like, number one, do we have one? Number two, do we use it? And number three, do we have a minimum baseline of expectations in terms of what kind of information we enter in there, right? So those are a couple of pieces. Oh, Ashton, hey, I'm reading your little comment right now. Hang on, let me get to it. Okay. Let me read this whole thing. You manage the operations team, excellent. They want work, and so you're delegating random work and self-care, and you want to be productive. Okay, so great question and great comments. Here's the deal, and I'm going to answer all of that here in a second. This is a time of unknown, right, for all of us. And we have this random space where we know that we still need to be productive for our employer if we're fortunate enough to be being paid, right? But at the same juncture, there's a lot of us that just don't function well with chaos. And chaos can mean unknown at work. Chaos could mean, oh my heavens, I now have all of my dogs at home because there's no such thing as doggy daycare, and I have 3 kids, and I have a spouse at home, right? That could be chaos. Getting on the phone and having regular structured time with your team is really important, right? So there ought to be at least a team, check-in every day, and then individual check-ins. And for you as a group to make decisions on what we're going to move forward this week, the next 2 weeks, this month, right? Folks, it's not going to be your entire strategic plan. We know that, right? So you'll make some decisions with input from them, Ashton, as to what's the most important. And then we have to focus on outcomes, not activity, right? So it's not, oh my heavens, they got to be online for 8 hours during the day, right? And at the ready for you to respond. It's what are we tasking them with from the larger conversation of what we want to complete during this time that we are away from the office, and then have regular check-ins about it, right? So that's kind of like moving this to action. You're going to have the PowerPoint deck from this session, and then I would encourage you to set up, first do some thinking yourself, and second, potentially share this with your team to say, hey, which of these might we want to tackle? Right? I'm not telling you need to tackle all of them for sure, right? If you've got that kind of time, I need you working with me because I got stuff for you to do. So make some decisions about which of these would actually help to put you in a different position of strength, and then what each team member's role is in order to be able to get pieces and parts done. And then we need to let them take care of themselves, right? If they can take care of themselves and feel somewhat settled in that area, they're going to be more productive for you during this time. So I am going to open this up for any other questions that you might have before I show or tell you, right, how to get a hold of me if you need additional help. Yay, Evan, right? So in case everyone doesn't see that, Evan says there's a company offering 90-day free VPN access for businesses and orgs impacted by COVID-19. And Evan has the link on the Idaho Nonprofits website, right? So that's excellent. Any of the rest of you have a comment or I have no time and your list, Kari, has just overwhelmed me and now I need to go eat an entire batch of chocolate chip cookie dough. Anyone? Okay, so as you think about where else I might be helpful right now, this is how you find me. So for those of you that have been through this jam with me, you can go ahead and sign off. For those of you who haven't, here's the deal. So you can find me on my website. You can find me via email. You can find me via my phone. I will be sending you, after we're done here, a follow-up email with a couple different links to my calendar. And those calendar links get you time on my schedule for free, right? So one of the links is, hey, I need hot help yesterday with something that's impacting us because of COVID-19, right? Half an hour calls, you can schedule as many as you need to. The other link is, hey, you know what? We're doing okay right now. And Kari, I don't need you, but eventually we'll potentially need you as a sounding board. Every Monday, I save time for nonprofits for half-hour calls, and I call it nonprofit therapy for a reason, because it's kind of like therapy. And you can talk about anything, right? How to negotiate a raise, how to fire a board member, how to blow up your fund development plan, if you want me to review a speech, whatever that is, right? There's a link for you. So you'll be getting an email from me after this session with that information. Evan will be sending out, as she always does, this webinar link. So in case this was so scintillating, you want to watch it again, right? You've got that. And you'll also have a link to the PowerPoint deck. And as we get ready to sign off today, because I'm not seeing any additional questions, then you guys can always hit me offline with additional thoughts that you might have. I'm so appreciative of the work that you always do, right, every day. And I'm even more appreciative and humbled for what you guys are doing now. I've had the luxury of working at home for the last 5 years. And so I have all my systems and I have all of the resources I need to do my work, and my work is helping you. And I recognize that for some of you, this is brand new uncharted territory. And please know how much I appreciate the work that you're doing, not only for yourself and your teams right now, but for your families and for the sector. So I hope that you have a wonderful afternoon, and I will be back again on Friday talking about self-care. So have a lovely, lovely afternoon and stay safe out there.